Welcome to Tattershall Castle, cared for by the National Trust. I'm Nigel, one of the volunteers here. You are surrounded by history, stretching back over 800 years. Most of what still stands today was built in the early 1400s by a medieval treasurer of England called Ralph Cromwell. He was a very powerful and wealthy man, second only to the king. We have analysed fragments of the past, carried out detailed research and undertaken archaeological surveys to try and map out how this place would have looked in Ralph Cromwell's time. The inner ward is where the Great Tower stands today. The moat surrounding this ward would have had a perimeter wall that circled the whole area. Inside the walls would have been a great hall, chapel, some lodgings and a variety of other important buildings. These are now lost to time. What we know for certain is that Tattershall Castle was not actually a defensive fortification. It was an opulent home built to impress. The Great Tower is the most striking symbol of this impressive display. It has been through some dramatic moments since its creation. We are lucky that this architectural wonder still survives. Buildings Archaeologist James Wright has carried out groundbreaking doctoral research on the castle in partnership with the National Trust and the University of Nottingham. He will now explain how significant the tower really is.
Originally, it was thought that Cromwell's Great Tower was constructed in the mid-1440s based on the building accounts of the castle. However, using scientific data of tree ring dating, it's been shown that the floor frame of the tower dates to no later than 1431. So the building is going up at that period in time. The importance here, because most people are probably thinking, well, what does 15 years really matter, is that Tattershall becomes a building which influences Eton College, which is built for royalty, rather than being influenced by it. So it goes on to influence an entire style of English architecture, which runs for about 200 years. The castle was built for Ralph Lord Cromwell, who was the Lord Treasurer of England, so the man responsible for holding the purse strings for the monarchy. And he wanted a structure which would reflect his great status in society. And by doing that, he deliberately engaged builders who knew about innovative architecture, and they were looking to mainland Europe. They were looking to France, to Germany, the Baltic, the Low Countries for these new ideas in how to actually design a building. And when they did this, even the building material, the brick, which is used here, is up to the minute. It's one of the first brick buildings in England. The research has shown us some quite surprising discoveries about the use and function of some of the buildings and spaces at the castle. So what was previously thought to be a stables has turned out to be a lodging. The guardhouse has become another lodging. The tilt yard have become gardens. The parlour is now a servants' hall, and the kitchens are actually a gatehouse. The roof at Tattershall is really unusual because it has these two tiers which have an arcaded cloister around them, and that cloister links heated banqueting suites, and there is nothing else like this anywhere at all in mainland Europe during the medieval period. So talking about the guardhouse here at Tattershall Castle, the term guardhouse is slightly problematic because it comes with connotations of militarism, fortification, defensibility. And the big story in English castle studies has been working away from those interpretations as we've understood the sheer complexity of how to interpret castles and their uses, functions, and how the spaces are actually approached in the medieval period. This building itself was probably never a place where soldiers were garrisoned, i.e. a guardhouse, but instead it was probably a very, very smart, quite lavish, well-appointed lodging range, and it came equipped with a fireplace for warmth and light, but also the comforts of an ensuite toilet as well, a latrine block which is in here. So it was a place for Lord Cromwell's retainers to spend time, to live in, to sleep in, and he moved with a really great household of, we know, over 100 people as he moved around the country. So he had to have plenty of space for them to sleep in when he came to Tattershall. Also, the guardhouse has been really important in the recent project at the castle because we've been able to understand something of the site's chronology. The Great Tower we now know was being built no later than 1431. However, the tree ring dating of the roof structure here in the guardhouse actually tells us that they were finishing the castle somewhere between 1446 and 51. So the dating of the trees that were felled to produce the timbers for the roof structure gives us the other end. So we've got the full chronology of the site. It takes about 20 years to construct Tattershall Castle. So this chimney piece tells you everything you need to know about Ralph Cromwell. Firstly, it establishes him as the big man of Tattershall. We've got a Cromwell weed, which is a play on words, known as a rebus. So there is the Cromwell, i.e. Cromwell. We've then got the treasurer's purse. This is reflecting his position in society. It also tells you what's paying for the whole thing. And then my favourite bit on it is the motto, "Have I not the right?" Now, why is he asking that? So this tells you there's a bit of an anxiety, a bit of a fault line in Cromwell's character. And he's asking that essentially because he's a man of the second rank. He's not of the very, very highest magnitude of aristocrat. He is keen, though, to tell you that his family does have distant connections with big, posh aristocrats, because this is the armorial of the Dalbini family. They are distant ancestors, but it is ancient history. This is quite unusual in 15th century carving to go back quite that far in terms of your family tree. So there's already a bit of a clue there that he's got concerns that he might not be quite as big and powerful and prestigious as everyone thinks he is, or as he like to be portrayed. But he does still have great power and pride, and we see that here. Well, we've got his own family armorial, and it's of course capped by this medieval helm symbol of his authority as a warrior. And there's a reminder here as well of these two curious, very hairy, bearded men carrying clubs. They're called the Wild Men, and they're a reminder to you to be a great and virtuous, chivalrous knight rather than the wild man himself. And Cromwell's really concerned to be seen as chivalrous and good and godly as well. So there's an element of piety here as well in the battle of good and evil. So he's using his religiosity as part of his symbols of lordship. Here we see the centaur fighting a dragon, symbol of good and evil. Here we see Samson fighting the lion, good and evil. And also St. Michael fighting the dragon too, good and evil. And this is all capped off by these crenellations at the top of the chimney piece, which is the ultimate symbol of lordship. It's a miniature castle.
The castle is absolutely covered in historic graffiti, some of it stretching right back to the medieval period, some of it much more modern. This is a piece which I'm particularly keen on. This is James Gibson, 1642. That's the first year of the British Civil Wars of the mid-17th century between Parliament and the Royalists. And James, we know this from archival accounts, is the vicar of Horncastle, which is just up the road. And he was brought here as a prisoner because his taste in preaching went very leaned towards the Catholic end of things. So he was very high church. And the man who owned and garrisoned this castle during the wars was Theophilus Clinton. And he was the complete opposite. He was incredibly puritanical. And so I think the wars were strongly religious in nature. It wasn't the only reason for the wars, but there was a strong element of religion there. And Theophilus brings James here and he imprisons him in the Great Tower. I think there's an element here as well of James trying to get one up over Theophilus, because he carves this graffito on the door jamb immediately adjacent to the way into the most prestigious area of the castle, which is the most high status bedroom, which is probably where Theophilus is sleeping himself. So James leaves a memento of his time as a prisoner here that Theophilus can never forget about.
After Lord Cromwell passed away, the castle changed hands many times. One notable owner was one of King Henry VIII's best friends, Charles Brandon. He owned the castle in the Tudor period and may have lived here for a little while. The English Civil War saw the castle used by soldiers. When the Civil War came to an end, the whole castle was nearly torn down because of its military use. Thanks to interventions, it was decided that the remaining ruins could stay. Its use changed hands in the following period, but it always served a purpose. It was once a romantic ruin, and then it was used by farmers. Cows were known to fill the ground floor of the tower. Sadly, this period saw the castle fall into terrible disrepair, with many floors caving in. It was Lord Curzon who rescued and restored the castle to its former glory, and on his death he gave the entire site to the National Trust. Thank you for learning more about us today and supporting our cause as we inspire you and future generations to look after nature, beauty and history for everyone forever.